looking at a little Altocumulus castellanus here, and also sunset. The days are really starting to get short. Here it is 8 o'clock and it's already sunset. So we're heading into winter here. And but on the weather maps, still looking a little bit like fall here. Anyway, this is Tim Vasquez. Good to be with you all again today. And we've got a few systems to look at. We're going to look at Hermine in just a second. But let's check at the large scale pattern across the Texas area. Well, we've been talking the past couple of days about high pressure up to the north. We've got kind of a northerly gradient in place, and that brings drier, milder air southward. And that's a big contrast from the typical southeasterly flow we have this time of year. Let's take a look at the station plots. You can see that north wind right there, and that's carried a lot of the convection out to the I-10 area of Texas. So this dry infusion, see these dew points? Like right here at Longview, we got 65. I think that's Carthage, or I'm not too sure what city that is. But 63 here around Arkadelphia, 54 when you get into the Ozarks. So this is some much drier air coming south. What's happening out east? Well, there's Tropical Storm Hermine, which was a hurricane when it was out in the Gulf of Mexico, but it's died off a little bit. Here's Gaston slowly slipping northeast through the Azores. Here's what Hermine looked like earlier in the day. This is the Aqua Polar Orbiter satellite, taken about 1 or 2 o'clock, and we can zoom in pretty tightly on what's left of that eye right there northwest of Savannah. See that right there? And the other thing that we notice here is the infusion of dry air into the backside of Hermine there. So much drier air feeding in, and that's very detrimental to tropical storms like this because their main mechanism is latent heat. That's what helps with the pressure falls in the center of the storm and helps draw that tropical air in. And most of that tropical air is actually coming in the east side through here. So as a result, we're seeing precipitation bands kind of formed up like that. Here's the rapid refresh model. This is kind of a quick look at the wind gust, and it kind of gives us an idea of what might be happening offshore. It's important to keep in mind that these winds are in knots. So this contour for white right here indicates 50 knots. So to go from knots to miles an hour, it's 1.15. And a very quick way to do that in your head is take the value, we'll take 50 for example, divide it by 10. Okay, that gives us 5. Now divide that 5 by 2. So we get 2.5. So add 5 to 2.5 and then add that to the value. So 57.5. See, it's pretty easy. So 57 knot gust, or 57 mile an hour gust in a huge swath offshore, and one little core of about 63, 65 miles an hour just off the coast. And likewise, a very narrow band of very high winds stretching across just a couple counties here of South Carolina. Let's see if that's detected by the METAR observation network, and this is probably the finest scale observations we can get. This is from federal and a few state networks. So looking at the gust right here on the right side of each plot, this is for 8 p.m. Eastern. And the strongest winds I'm seeing is this 36 right here. So what is that, 36 in miles an hour? Well, divide by 10, then divide that by 2. So that's going to be about 40 to 41 miles an hour. So it looks like through that swath there, that's the highest winds we're detecting. However, since we just started this webcast, we have newer data. So let's retrieve that in digital atmosphere. And we will replot this here. And now you can see that the strongest winds have shifted up into North Carolina, getting a 36 knot gust there. Now, one thing that's very important when you use this high-res model data is to verify it, because you can see that this model here, this is the 1 hour forecast for a 22Z run. So that would be, what is that, 6 p.m. Eastern? So if we want to look at the data now, we can switch that forward. Let me do that on the other chart here. Okay, 3 hour forecast valid for 1Z. We need to verify that and see if that data is valid, because sometimes you do get some significant discrepancies, especially with MCS clusters or MCS lines, that kind of thing. So where is the center of our system at 1Z here? Well, large area of north winds inland, and then we've got these southeast winds here along the coast. And then this flow is coming up from the south. So it looks to me like the center of it is about right in this area, right along the border, maybe about 20 miles inland. And let's look at the radar just to be sure. Got to use all your tools. Now, we're not going to be able to see the center of this very well looking just at patterns. I mean, can't really tell anything. However, we can run an animation. And I'm looking for the strongest rotation. The only thing that this is going to be up at about a couple thousand feet off the ground, so it may differ from the surface data a little bit. But I think the strongest rotation I'm seeing is right around here. So putting that all together, I would say we probably have a center right in this area. So let's look at the model data and see if that rapid refresh is verifying correctly. Okay, as we can see, it's close. It's maybe a tiny bit behind the real data. So maybe the model is just a tiny bit slow. So we can use that information to adjust the forecasts as we go forward. So the latest frame we have here is going to be 5Z, which is 1 a.m. And it's only moved the center maybe about 100 miles to just north of Wilmington. So strongest gusts are going to be there along the, the Outer Banks of North Carolina. As far as the strongest gusts, your people, exposed to buildings and infrastructure. Looks like the highest gusts are going to be out in this area. Then offshore, the strongest gusts just off the coast of Wilmington right there. So that's the immediate forecast on that storm. Just going to be tracking up along the coast and going to be up in the Virginia area tomorrow morning or during the day. Probably not a good idea, not a good day for Norfolk for tomorrow, I would expect. All right, what's going on elsewhere in the country? Let's check out the Southwest, and with all this tropical storm action, we don't want to kind of get distracted, because the weather we're going to be seeing is going to come from the north or the west, so we want to kind of keep tabs on that. Looks like just the usual heat low across the desert Southwest. Maybe a couple of lows out in the Great Basin in the Southwest area. Go up to the Pacific Northwest, and it looks like they've broken that heat wave. We were seeing like 95 to 105 out in this area last week, and looks much better now. Actually, I think that might have been earlier this week. Can't remember. These days are just kind of blurring together. But we do see north winds across Montana and very cool temperatures. 66, 70. Well, we have an 84 there at Billings, but the general idea, we've got some high pressure working southward, and it looks like probably a front. See those southerly winds just out ahead of it? And then we have north winds behind that, so new front coming in. And just for the heck of it, let's see if we can see that on the polar orbiter data. Looking at Montana here, do we see a front? See a lot of clouds here in Wyoming, a lot of low cumulus, so definitely very unstable through that area. That may be associated with the southwest monsoon there. But as far as a front, I guess I don't really see that. So it's probably coming through kind of dry there. All right, what else do we want to cover? Let's move this forward. We're going to look at the moisture. This is the water vapor imagery. And what's the big thing that we notice here across the Midwest? This big red area. This corresponds to dry air, warm, dry air. That's the assumption you make when you see these red colors, warm and dry. You can't really make as many assumptions when you're looking at white conditions because it could be cold or moist, one of the two, and you don't really know for sure. But here we know it's warm and dry. So this is definitely being worked on by subsidence and upper level, probably an upper level high. And this is a good time to check out the soundings for that area. Let's check out the sounding for Lincoln. Man, look at that subsidence inversion. See that right there? It's based at that level, and above that, a lot of dry air. And we can tell that's a subsidence inversion because near the base, it's very warm and very dry. We'll pull up one more sounding. Let's do Davenport. Again, there's some very good subsidence. So that's probably tied in with some ridging aloft moving into that area. Let's see if we can pull up a sounding ahead of Hermine there. We'll pull up Charleston. They are showing very humid conditions on that sounding ascent. And there's a good possibility that this is in rain too. There's probably some rain showers in the area. So there's a risk that a lot of this is contaminated, which means you get evaporation off the sensor, and that can kind of foul things up. So I would be very leery about using this data. But this is about what I would expect in a tropical system, in a monsoon pattern, such as India in July and August. Pretty similar situation here. And let's see what's coming in the backside. I think Atlanta. I don't know if Atlanta would be a good one. I want something in southeastern Georgia or southwestern. Let's try Birmingham. Yeah, see here you can see those north winds coming in the back of that system. And it's dry just off the surface. Dew points fall off into the 50s and 40s. All right, let's check out our forecast. I think that's about all I want to cover for the current data. So starting out, we're looking at precipitable water and pressure. And let me paint on the surface systems. Let me try to use proper colors here. Okay, we have a low right there in Alberta. And you can see that cold front. There's some evidence of a cold front right here, and maybe a warm front up in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. So there's system number one. You might want to kind of look around and see if you see any also before I get to them. Well, there's Hermine right there over the Carolinas. We have another system here out in the Atlantic. Very likely a cold front right along there. So that means Hermine is going to become extratropical. It's going to become baroclinic as it links up with this temperature differential through here. Okay, we also got high pressure moving through the Great Lakes. So this is a continental polar air mass sinking southeastward. There's a bit of a ridge extending into Texas. We have a Pacific high. Actually, two of them, one near the Gulf of Alaska and then a bigger one out in the middle of the North Atlantic. And then, of course, we have the heat low across the Arizona desert. All right, and let's see. I'm still missing one. There's a fresh Canadian air mass, high pressure area over Northwest Territories, or I guess that would be Nunavut, that new territory up there, and that's of course feeding the cooler air coming in the backside there around Alberta. And let's see, did I get them all? I think that's probably most of them right there. Oh yeah, I forgot the Bermuda High. There it is right there, and you can see a little bit of ridging extending towards the Bahamas. And of course, that's feeding some of the moist air northward towards that frontal system and towards Hermine. So we've got the basic weather patterns in mind, and we can kind of start from that as we look through the forecast charts. And also look at the moisture field here. We've got one little pool of moisture around the Bay of Campeche and the Yucatan, and maybe a little bit along the Texas coast. Elsewhere looks to be pretty dry. See that dry air coming in the backside in the Ohio Valley. All right, let's move forward. We'll go forward about a day. You see Hermine there moving off the Carolina coast. Looks like it kind of grazes the New York area, Long Island and Cape Cod. Meanwhile, you can see a new slug of moisture coming up. Remember that stuff we had in the Bay of Campeche? There it is, moving northward onto the Texas coast. And it moves into the Texas area by Monday. There's Hermine. It looks like it kind of stalls off the coast of Long Island. So this is already Tuesday morning. So wow, that's some pretty slow movement. I wonder if that's going to pan out or if the models are off. But if that system stalls there along the Long Island coast, that could set them up for a little bit of flooding. Okay, going into Wednesday and Thursday, it's like one more slug here through Texas and Louisiana of moisture. Hermine still sitting there along the coast. And then getting out towards Friday next weekend. Let's see, what do we got? We have cyclogenesis here in the northern plains, new front coming down. There's some moisture there in the Gulf. And it looks like a new system sweeps through the Midwest into the Ohio Valley. This is around September 11th. Good grief, it's been 15 years since 9/11. It makes me feel old. So more moisture coming up into Texas after that weekend. And a lot of easterly flow through here. That's very significant. That's upslope. That's conducive to development of clouds, precip, and low pressure out in this area. So maybe kind of a wet pattern after next weekend. And that's about all we have there. And let's close up with the upper level data. Upper level data showing trough off the Pacific coast, another one in the Maritimes, and a ridge across the central U.S. So some of that ridging is making it all the way down into the Illinois area, probably feeding some of that subsidence there. Okay, so trough moves inland over the weekend into the western U.S., so it's probably going to be a little bit wet there. Pretty strong jet feeding into that region. Getting towards the end of this upcoming week, it's like polar front jet, pretty well entrenched across the U.S., especially the Rockies right there, the northern Rockies. September 11th through 12th, trough moves into the central U.S., so rain chances will definitely go up in the Midwest and Great Lakes area. And then we see this right here. It looks like we got a cutoff low starting to form. There's a high kind of associated with that cutoff there. And looks like we got that cutoff low just kind of sitting there over Utah. So definitely some chances of storms and rain right in that area. And we'll see what happens with that. That's 240 hours out, so a lot could change between now and then. Anyway, that's about all I got. Good grief, how long did we go on here? 22 minutes. Anyway, definitely keep me informed if you notice any issues with the audio. I've got this audio panel here. It's pretty complicated. I'm still trying to figure it out and read the manual, but hopefully everything sounds good there. I've been wanting to do the SCUT tutorial. I never got around to that this weekend, or this week, but I will try to do it this weekend. Maybe at the end of one of these daily webcasts. And if you have any websites you want to pass along, any suggestions, we can definitely take a look at that. Just send me an email. Go to the weathergraphics.com contact page. I'll show you that real quick. Weather Graphics, it's going to be the contact link right there on the left. And, if you want to pick up a book, I certainly wouldn't mind there. That is my website, so a little disclosure there. I think that's about all I got, so I will be back tomorrow at the usual time, 8 o'clock, and we'll see you then.